Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you all are having a great day so far. So today I am going to continue with this brake series by showing how to replace brake pads on the rear of the Cadillac XT5. This is a 2018 model, and so replacing rear brakes in comparison to front brakes can tend to be a little bit more complicated depending on the vehicle. So we have a few more tools here. And of course, we're going to be using our jack stand, the tire iron that I mentioned previously, the actual vehicle jack itself. I have this one with 2 missing front wheels. If you have something better, I would recommend to use something better and not something like this. So I also have these Evolution brake pads, which I got on discount. I have a C-clamp to compress the piston. I also have this, which is an Allen wrench set. Apologies for the traffic going on behind me. I believe this is 5 millimeters. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. However, we are going to be using this for something that we will see a little bit later. I have the ratcheting tool. This one looks to be 14 millimeters. Maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that as well. I have a pair of needle nose pliers. Now, I ended up not needing this, but I'll show you why a little bit later. And of course, a flathead screwdriver, just in case for a little bit of security, I guess, because sometimes there could be quite a lot of dust built up. This is from my previous, since I've already done the wheel on the passenger side. So right now I'm going to be doing the wheel on the driver's side. And sometimes those brake pads could be very rusted. So you need to pry them off with something like a flathead screwdriver. And also because of that dust, I also have safety glasses here. So we are going to be wearing these while going through this replacement and repair. There, like I mentioned before, there are some nuances to this process in comparison to the front brakes. So we will go through that as we get into it. So let's get started. So here we are again. I have the wheel off and it is mounted onto the jack stand below with the actual jack, giving a little bit of extra security and support. If you wanted to see that process, you could also see it in my front brakes video. It's essentially the same here. That is removing the wheel and mounting it, so giving it a good push, making sure that doesn't fall over, that kind of thing. So now moving on to the caliper, we can see here that's a little bit of a different design, and it's not going to open up like a clamshell on this particular vehicle, so the XT5. There are going to be 2 bolts that you will need to remove, and there is also going to be some other pieces to take into consideration as well. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and remove this by taking our ratcheting tool, making sure that we have it set to loosen instead of tighten, and go ahead and loosen that. I think it's actually not tighten right now. 1 second. Yeah, it's going to be difficult to hold this with one hand and be able to simultaneously remove a bolt. Yeah, let's tighten. So, yeah. I'll try to figure out a mounting solution, but if I can't, then I'll just say I'll be right back. So I tried a couple different mounting solutions for this camera, but it didn't really work out. It kept on either falling or getting blocked, so you couldn't really see anything, but you really didn't miss much. So for the top bolt, I was just able to remove it as it is. So here it is loosened, and now I'm loosening it here. I'm going to place it to the side. However, the bottom bolt here, so I actually had to use an extension because the surrounding of the bolt I could not really get a good situation where it would sit flat around the head. There was not enough clearance. So I had to use an extension to provide that clearance. So keep that in mind. Also, this bolt was rusted to absolute hell, and it took a lot of effort to take it off. So keep that in mind. That's something you might run into when removing this bolt as well. So moving on from that, now the caliper should be loose or free, and you should be able to move it back and forth. However, since this is pretty heavily rusted, I'm going to have to probably take a flathead screwdriver and pry it from the top, from the bottom, just to sort of ease it out. And then after I do so, I'm going to mount it on top of this wooden block so that it's not just hanging from a cable. And then we'll proceed with the rest of the brake pad replacement process. So here we are. I just removed the caliper by loosening it with the flathead screwdriver from the top and the bottom, just slowly leveraging it so that it was able to be removed. It's not just freely hanging. Right now it's sitting on this wooden block down here so that it doesn't pull any of these lines and just, you know, makes the job a little bit more complicated. So here we have the old brake pads, and we are going to go ahead and remove these. You could probably remove them with your fingers, like so. However, if not, once again, you can use flathead screwdriver to try to remove them as well. The one in the back is going to be a little bit tighter on, because with these brackets, it's sort of locked into place. So you may have to get a little bit creative when trying to remove them by using a flathead screwdriver and then prying it from one side, prying it from the other side, and working your way around it so that the brake pad comes out and gets loose. So I'm going to do that off camera, and then we'll proceed. So I was able to remove the brake pad from the other side of the rotor, and now we have our old brake pads versus our new. So the brake pads, which are going to go on the inside where I'm putting my two fingers here, is going to be the one with this clip on it, and on the outside over here of the rotor are going to be these brake pads. I do not believe they're interchangeable. However, perhaps someone can correct me on that if I am wrong. Now that they are removed, we can go ahead and replace them. And replacing them is similar to how we have done in the previous video. So that's once again getting down here, taking the new brake pad, making sure that the curvature is aligned with the rotor in this manner, and then sort of inserting them in place in such a way that they will go ahead and sit flush. And sort of difficult to do that with one hand, so I'm going to go ahead and, oh, well, there we go. That's almost one. Fantastic. Yep. I'm going to go ahead and be right back. And when we get back, we will see the two brake pads mounted and then take a closer look at the caliper. So now the brake pads are mounted. Something that I wanted to mention before continuing is that here on the outside of the rotor, at least on the driver's side, on the bottom, there are these little metal, I guess you could call them sort of pieces on this bracket. And the way you're going to mount this brake is by pushing it in first this way, so bottom side first, so that it is above and behind that little metal clip. And then from there, you'll be able to slot this one in. And if we take a look at the other side as well, we can see that there's a similar setup here with a clip. I know this is a pretty bad camera angle, but there's a clip on the top, but then you could slot it in on the bottom. So it's sort of the opposite. Whereas over here, that clip's on the bottom, you could slot it on the top. Over here, the clip is on the top, and you can slot it in at the bottom. So that's just something to keep in mind as well while you're replacing these brake pads. With that being said, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the caliper. Now, to compress the piston here on the caliper, if you have watched the previous video, what we have done, there's a lot of rust on this. What we have done is taken a C-clamp and place it on one side of the caliper and slowly compress it so that it goes inward. We are going to be doing similar to that. However, there is a caveat to this process. As you can notice, there is something that we have not seen before. This electric, I believe it's some kind of e-brake module, or someone can also correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'm not entirely sure, but this needs to be removed, and there is a little spindle looking thing inside which needs to be depressed first, and we are going to do that by using our Allen wrench and twisting it until it is fully compressed, which will allow the piston to be compressed as well, so that loosens it. If you were to try to compress the piston as it is right now, as we've done before, the problem with that is that it will move a certain direction, but it will not actually go down all the way, and that's the biggest problem. On other vehicles, you can also use, if I have it around me somewhere here. Bear with me one second. All right, my needle nose pliers were literally just to the left of me. But you would typically take something like this, and with these 2 points, you would slot them in onto those 2 edges of the caliper. As we can see on the left and on the right, there are these 2 openings where you would slot that those needle nose pliers into, and then you would be able to twist to the right, and that would compress it. So on other vehicles I've worked on, that would actually be a crosshead, so sort of like, you know, this is pretty poor representation, but sort of a cross like this, and you'd be able to put a flathead screwdriver into it and then just twist it to the right to compress it. This is true for Honda vehicles, true on some Toyotas I've worked on, some Mazdas I've worked on, also even some older Fords. But for GM, at least to my knowledge, and for this vehicle specifically, they decided to use this configuration, which I think is, you know, kind of dumb. But I mean, all right, so a car was passing, but in any case, main point here being that, in my personal opinion, this is kind of dumb. GM always has to do something differently in comparison to other manufacturers, and it's very annoying in terms of, I guess, from a repair perspective. So yeah, or perspective, I guess I should say. But in any case, we will go ahead and proceed with removing this. It has a barcode on it for anyone that's interested. You could flip the video, I guess. And yeah, there is a name for this. I read about it. I don't remember what it's called. So for those who are interested, you can go ahead and insert the name in the comments or something, so we could make this repair a little bit more complete with all that terminology. Let's go ahead and remove this. So proceeding with this removal, we go ahead and take our, it looks to be a, like I mentioned before, a 5mm, maybe, I'm not sure, but it's the one that slots in and the one that we can go ahead and slot into. This is going to be on pretty tightly, and doing it with one hand is going to be a pain, so I'm going to be doing that off camera. But there isn't only one, there are 2. So there is one on the side over here, and there is one on the right side, so on the left and the right. There aren't any on the back, so once we remove these 2 screws, we will be able to take this module off and take a closer look at that center area where we're going to be inserting a slightly larger tool, I believe, to loosen that as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So both of those bolts were removed. I placed them over to the side and they were actually on pretty tightly, so you might have to take a little bit of leverage to move them. And now we can see that this is moving freely backward and forward, so we just shake it off a little bit, and here it is. It comes right off. And now we can see that center area and where it sort of sits inside of this. So we have some kind of gear there with all these little teeth. We are going to place this over to the side and take a closer look at the caliper here. Now, the caliper, just trying to situate that. Over here, we have this, which is very tight and it needs to be loosened. Oh, we can actually use the same tool. And we can go ahead and, oh, I stand corrected. We actually cannot use that, or can we? We can, yeah, okay, we can. So we are going to continue twisting this. Just basically put it into the center, twist until it's all the way to the right, until it stops. Continue twisting. Don't drop the tool. Okay, and now we can see that it has stopped. So I'm trying to put pressure on it and it's not moving. So it's twisted to the right all the way, which means that as we compress the caliper, or the piston inside the caliper, then it's going to be flush with this surrounding caliper material. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to try to mount this in such a way so that we can actually see that process. But if I'm not able to, then I'll just cut over to that and we'll proceed with the repair. So unfortunately, I really couldn't get a better angle than this, but basically I have the clamp on one side, not directly on the center of this piece, and on the other side it is flat against the piston there. So I'm going to be twisting slowly, and we will see, hopefully, that the piston is becoming compressed. All right. Man, what a pain. There we go. And now it is fully compressed. We can see that the piston is now flush with the surrounding material of the caliper, which is the same as what we have done with the front brakes as well. So, yep. Okay, and now that the caliper is fully compressed, we can go ahead and insert it back over the brake pads. And doing this with one hand is kind of difficult, but it should be able to slot into place. And if it's not, if there's any kind of obstruction, make sure that you are pressing these back, since they need to fit over this boot. And the same with the one on the bottom as well. I accidentally hit the power button when I was trying to slot it over. Yeah. You know what? I am just going to do this with both hands like a normal person and be right back. Oh, scratch that. I forgot to do something very critical. We're not going to be inserting the caliper yet, because something that we still have to do is put this electronic thing back onto it again. So we are going to mount that as it has been mounted previously. There's going to be a certain direction in which it is going to sit, and it only sits one way. So basically, now that we have it sort of off like this, we can sort of move it from side to side, making sure that we are able to have it sit evenly. And this might take a few tries, but when it is sitting evenly, it slots into place and there's going to be no play in it whatsoever. So it's just move like this, and it's completely flush with those screw holes as well. So now we are going to take the screws that we've had over there and insert them into those two holes. And let's tighten them down, and then put the caliper back on. When we return, all of that is going to be assembled. So in the previous shot, I actually had it on backwards. So, learn from my mistakes and go ahead and make sure that when you are aligning it, this is incredibly difficult to do with one hand, but as you are aligning it, make sure that there are two screw holes, since on the other side over here, there is just a flat place without a hole. So it can only fit one way. And after we put those screw holes into place, or those screws into place, and hands tighten them, then we can take our Allen wrench, which we used previously, tighten it further. And right now it's hand tight. Off camera, I will go ahead and tighten it all the way. And then we will cut to slotting the caliper over the new brake pads. So now we have slotted the caliper over the two brake pads. It was able to go on pretty seamlessly. And we need to replace the bolts from the top and from the bottom over here. The bolts are right here. So difficulties aside, we're going to go ahead and slot the, I don't even know how I'm doing this, but the first bolt. Wow. Very unique challenges here, but there we go. We have the first bolt slotted in place. And now we can take the second bolt, and it's sort of loose here, and slot that into place here as well. I would recommend removing as much rust as you can from this. However, as it tends to be the case, I'm pretty lazy, so I just do it this way. Hands tighten it first, and then further tighten it down with your ratcheting wrench. So we can go ahead and do that here. I'm using an extension on the bottom. Yeah, that's what happens when it's very rusted. I'll be right back. Okay, so now that both bolts have been replaced, the new brake pads are in, as they should be. Something that I forgot to mention is that usually there would be two holes on top of the brake pads to put some kind of retaining clamp. However, from the original brake pads, there were no clips, so I just decided to leave them off in this instance. And now we can go ahead and put the wheel back on and tighten down all the lug nuts, lower the vehicle, and then wrap up with some final thoughts. All right, all the lug nuts have been tightened. I've lowered the vehicle to the ground, and that's essentially the job. As we can see, removing rear brakes tends to be a little bit more complicated. Also, replacing them tends to be a little bit more complicated than, of course, the front brakes. There are a few more steps to it, but basically most other things are the same. It's just annoying when other car manufacturers tend to make things in a different way, and that makes any kind of associated repairs more difficult as well. But it's, you know, it's just a part of the process, I suppose. So, in any case, I hope this was helpful to any of you who has a vehicle with a similar configuration, trying to remove and replace those brake pads. Let me know if you have any questions or comments in the comments below. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Have a great day and take care. Thanks for watching.